assembling an S4HANA project dream team, and best practices for S4HANA implementations. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover here in episode number 10 of Journey to S4HANA.
Welcome to Journey to S4HANA, the podcast that covers everything related to SAP implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with SAP and covers the realistic truth behind S4HANA, Ariba, and SuccessFactors ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of SAP, an existing ECC, or R3 customer, a multinational team, or a mid-sized organization, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberly.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 10 of the Journey to S4HANA podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into this episode today.
Yeah, lots to cover here today. Appreciate you being here and appreciate you all listening here today. For those that don't know, we have new episodes of this podcast every week. You can find past episodes that you may have missed at journeyto4hana.com. The show is sponsored by our company, Third Stage Consulting, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. So thanks for being here today. We've got a great episode for you today. We've got a first-time guest on the show, Jonathan Whipple, who's a recruiter in the SAP S4HANA space. He's going to be on the show talking about how to assemble an S4HANA project dream team. And what's great about Jonathan is he has a Hollywood background. So he actually comes from the world of entertainment and casting for reality TV shows, which is part of why I find him so fascinating, that he's taken that skill set, and during COVID, he sort of transitioned into the world of S4HANA recruiting. So we're going to get into his whole backstory, as well as what he looks for when he's recruiting and what his customers are looking for when they're recruiting for S4HANA projects. And this is going to be useful if you're either trying to build your own internal team for your S4HANA implementation, or if you're a consultant or a contractor and you're trying to find work and you're trying to get placed on an S4HANA implementation. It'll be a great conversation for you from that perspective as well. And then we're also going to cover an article that you've uncovered for us here, Darian, it's related to best practices for S4HANA implementation. So we look forward to getting into that. But before we get into that topic and our guest here today, what are some of the social media questions you've got for us?
Yeah, so the first one actually got messaged to us. It is a pretty lengthy one, but it is a good one. So it is, first, I want to thank you for your work and great content that you and your team broadcast on a weekly basis. I have been following your channel for almost a year, and about a year ago, I made a switch from a business organization to an IT consulting company as a senior Infor M3 consultant. It has been a great experience and a journey. During this period, I watched your videos about transitioning to a consulting career, and yes, I can testify your comments about the characteristics and capabilities required for this transition are great comments and advice. Thank you for that too. Now, I have a question about S4HANA consulting ecosystem, which I don't belong to, but I'm curious to learn more about. I learned from your videos about what is happening in the SAP ecosystem and the challenges ahead and the potential opportunities for consulting in the S4HANA space. A friend of mine is considering a career change similar to the one I did last year, and I suggested him your videos and your channel. This week, we looked together on LinkedIn to see if there were any job posting opportunities for consultants in this space, and I was surprised to find that there weren't many S4HANA functional consulting postings, but there were many for Microsoft Dynamics 365. How does this conciliate with the changes in the S4HANA space? Yeah, so what are your thoughts on that whole thing, Eric?
That's a great question. It's an interesting question, too. I would have been surprised by that, or I am surprised by that as well, that he found it easier to find D365 consulting roles than S4HANA. Both Microsoft and SAP are in somewhat of the same boat, where there's a lot of legacy customers that are scrambling to upgrade to either D365 in the case of Microsoft, or, as is the focus of this podcast, S4HANA in the SAP space. So, all I can say is that I know there's a lot of demand for SAP and S4HANA skill sets right now. And in fact, we're going to talk about it with our guest later in the show. Part of what I want to ask him is some questions around the ecosystem and hiring opportunities and, what the future of S4HANA consulting looks like. So I'm actually very surprised that he didn't find a lot there in his research. So I don't know if he's looking in the wrong places, or if they're just not widely publicized types of roles, or what it may be too is that a lot of the S4HANA consulting roles are sort of dominated by the really big consulting providers. and they oftentimes do their own, have their own recruiting channels. So I don't know if it's because the D365 space is a little more fragmented. So you have a lot of smaller and mid-market sorts of resellers and VARs that are out there looking for D365 consultants for their projects. I'm purely speculating at this point, but that's the only reason I can think of why it might be more abundant in the D365 space than in the SAP space. I think there's a lot of future potential and current potential in the S/4HANA space. Having said that, though, I do know that a lot of the big consulting firms have also had layoffs recently. So maybe they just have, I don't know if they're struggling or if they've downsized significantly, but that could be part of it too. Maybe they're just not hiring as aggressively as they were before. So there's a lot of different things that could be factoring in, but it does surprise me as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another kind of question that kind of is similar to this one that we got is more student focused instead of switching careers. But this is a student. He has a focus in web development and security, and he's asking, how should I orient myself in order to future-proof myself in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to future-proof yourself is to, first, learn about business and technology and have a pretty broad understanding of the different dimensions of S/4HANA implementations, including the technology, but not limited to the technology. So really understanding program management, change management, architecture, and all the different dimensions of a project. You can't be an expert in everything, obviously, but if you can expand your knowledge base to be outside of just one module and outside of just the technology itself, that's going to open up a lot more avenues and opportunities for you. So that's one way. The other way is to really stay on top of some of the emerging technologies. For example, if you can figure out how to use AI to do your job more effectively and more efficiently, and you can really master that and demonstrate that to a recruiter or to someone that's looking to fill a position, that's going to be valuable as well. So I would start by, you have to start off early in your career. You do have to specialize a bit because that's what's going to get your foot in the door, and that you need to build that depth. But as you build that depth, you can then start to add some breadth to your skill set as well. So that'd be the main advice I'd have for someone like that that's starting out in the SAP space.
Yeah, that's definitely some great advice for anybody looking to get into this industry. But I kind of want to switch gears here and go to our newsworthy topic of the day, which is about SAP S/4HANA best practices on how to implement it and everything like that. So this article talks about the key strategies, which include data migration, effective change management, and tailored user training. The clear objectives are also listed here as something that you want to be able to get. Stakeholder engagement and resource allocation are all critical, is what this article mentions. If we had you rank what is most important between project planning, data migration, change management, and user training, what area do you feel like is the most important when it comes to implementation and best practices when implementing S/4HANA?
Ooh, that's a good question. They're all really important, but I'd probably put project planning first. I'm tempted to say change management, and what was the last one? What was the last thing?
Data migration and user training.
Yeah, I'd probably say, it's tempting to want to say user training or change management. Data is obviously really important too. But I think project planning sort of captures all of that. And it also ensures that you've got not just the change management and user adoption and training piece covered, not just the data piece covered, but also your business processes. It ensures you've got your team mobilized internally. You've upskilled your team to get them ready for a transformation. You have a realistic plan. You have a realistic budget. So, looking at it from a pure or from a not just a technology project perspective, but more of a broader transformation program perspective, you need some time to do that as an organization. And so having a realistic plan up front and in a realistic planning phase to get through all of that is something that's really critical. And in companies that skip past that and decide they just want to jump in and start deploying stuff, building and deploying technologies, those companies almost always struggle significantly. They end up going over budget. They end up taking way more time than they should have because they didn't have a proper plan, or they had an unrealistic plan based on their software vendor's sales proposal. So, what you need to do is take that time up front. And in fact, we have a guest who's coming on later this season who's going to talk about this too, the importance of phase zero planning. And we actually talk about it as a recurring theme throughout this podcast. But what we've seen both with our own consulting team and with our clients and with even outside customers of SAP that are not third stage consulting clients, they all tend to say the same thing, which is take that time up front to get that realistic plan in place. and make sure you've got that all covered. If you want to hear a conversation that dives into a fair amount of detail, if you go back to episode number 3 of this podcast, we had Carms Saliba on the show, and he is a client of ours, and he works for a manufacturer, a mid-sized manufacturer that just recently implemented S4HANA. He was the project lead, and that's one of the things he talks about too, is how important it is to get that plan right and all the project planning. If you do that right, you're going to sort of address the data piece, the change piece, the training piece, and every other important work stream in a project.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a good resource for if you are looking for how to plan your project. It'll be a good resource for you to figure out what to value most during that time for your company, for sure. But I'm really excited to get into our guest today. It's going to be a great interview.
Yeah, we're going to, the worlds of Hollywood and technology, SAP, are going to collide here in just a moment. We're going to have Jonathan Whipple on the show, who's a really interesting guy. I actually haven't known him for long. I've only known him a few months, and I met him through LinkedIn, and I just found him very fascinating. I forgot how I came across, he showed up in my feed, probably because he's posting about SAP, and I follow SAP stuff, obviously. And he showed up in my feed, and he's a very unique person. He's a good person to follow on social media. I'll let him explain his background. He's got a really interesting, non-traditional background, which I think probably makes him better at what he does than the average SAP recruiter. So you're not going to want to miss this conversation. It's a great one. He's a great guy. Look forward to having Jonathan Whipple on the show here in just a moment. He's a recruiter. He's going to be on talking about how to assemble an S4HANA project dream team. So be sure to stick around, and we'll be right back with more. If you're going through an S4HANA implementation, you're looking for best practices and tips on how to make your project more successful, I encourage you to check out 2 resources that I made available to our listeners here on this podcast. First is our guide to a successful S4HANA implementation. It's a paper that I wrote based on all of our clients that have implemented S4HANA, some of the lessons we've learned, some of the best practices that we typically advise our clients to follow when going through their S4HANA implementation. So be sure to check that out. You can find that in the links below in this podcast. You can also scan the QR code right in front of you. The second thing you might want to check out is an online course that I've created. It's a course that's called the Deep Dive into SAP S4HANA Implementations. And in that 2.5-hour course, I get into all the basics of what SAP S4HANA is, what it takes to make the project more successful, how to manage change, how to handle the project planning, how to manage your system integrator, as well as some case studies from some of our clients and some of the lessons learned from some of our clients. So check out that training as well. So there's 2 things you could check out here, both in the links below. One is the guide to S4HANA implementations. The other is my S4HANA training course. So be sure to check it out. And our goal here is to help you be more successful in your transformation. So I hope you found this information useful, and we'll continue on with the show.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Welcome back to Journey to S4HANA, episode number 10. This is the podcast that covers everything related to S4HANA implementations. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journeyto s4hana.com. You can also find all our past episodes by going to journeyto s4hana.com. Show is produced by Major Tom Productions. It's sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, and I am excited for our guest here today. It's a first-time guest on the show. Actually, he's a first-time guest on any of my podcasts, and this is the first time we've had a chance to talk. And this is Jonathan Whipple, who's an S4HANA recruiter based out of Los Angeles or the Los Angeles area, and he's in Los Angeles because he came from the entertainment and Hollywood industry in particular, and did a lot of work with reality TV and casting and things like that. I'll let him describe his background better than I can, but really interesting guy, and he's got a unique perspective on the current state of recruiting within S4HANA, but also sort of the ways to put together an ideal dream team for your S4HANA implementation. So with that all being said, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, glad to have you. This is the first time you and I have had a chance to formally interview on a podcast together. So really excited to have you here. We've had a chance to chat in the past, but never in a podcast format. Before we jump into some of this SAP career type stuff that we're going to get to here in a moment, maybe tell us a little about you and your background, what you do.
Yeah, so I am an SAP recruitment expert. So all things people with SAP is my area of expertise. So by day, I'm a recruiter. By night and by very, very, very early morning, I am a content creator. So I love talking about all things SAP community as they relate to the people who make this ecosystem a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you've got two jobs there. And what's super fascinating about your background that I'd love for you to share is just your journey to becoming an SAP recruiter. You weren't the prototypical go to college to become an SAP recruiter kind of guy. You had a former life. Could you tell us a little bit about that former life and sort of how you made the transition into SAP?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I worked in entertainment. I produced television for a decade before moving over to SAP. So all things reality television is really where I lived for a long time on the front end. So in pre-production, I did casting and development. It's very, very similar to recruiting what I was doing. It was finding the right person for the right role, really matching that up. So whether that's people competing on a competition show, whether that's chefs, whether that's businesses transforming with the help of a billionaire, people trying to build the coolest thing with Lego, kind of you name it, I've touched that at some point. So helping everyday people really achieve their dreams, transform on television and put themselves out there in interesting ways, and also helping celebrities and folks who are adjacent to kind of the celebrity sphere become hosts. So, actors, pop stars, professional athletes, professional wrestlers, professional fighters, helping them transition to the next part of their career as a host. And what does that look like? So, yeah, my career, even in entertainment, was focused on people. And that's, I guess, what I'm focused on in life as well. I'm passionate about people and relationships.
Yeah, that's super cool. Super interesting background. And what is it that, like, how did you make that transition? That's not a transition I've seen before, nor is it one that I would expect to see, in the space. So how do you go from entertainment, especially now that you still live in LA? So you're still in LA. How and why did you make that transition from entertainment and TV to SAP recruiting?
So the how and why, I'll start with the why. So I was able to use generative AI very early on. I had some demos. I had some people in, I guess, just outside of entertainment who were like, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're generating images. Here's how we're generating video. And starting to kind of look at that and being a sci-fi fan myself, I was like, okay, I can see where we're headed. I can see that we're not far away, maybe a decade down the road at that point of generating our own content. I'm waiting for another season of The Sopranos. It's never going to come, but I'm going to be generating it eventually. I'm aware of that. So I saw the writing on the wall. And, everything that happened in the entertainment industry over the last year and a half with strikes really was what I felt in my gut as a possibility, and it was verified. It happened and played out in a very real way that was very painful for a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of people that I care about. So the move, I think, was a smart one. Um, Prior to getting into entertainment, I actually had a little stint in recruiting with some guys who very focused on SAP at the time. I've stayed very close with them, with all the partners at the company that I now work with, Local World. So they launched their company, and I was like, guys, what do you think? A decade later, could I do this? And they were like, well, you're going to have to sell me. You're going to have to tell me how you're going to do this. And so I'd say they took a really big chance on me, and I hope they feel that it's paid off. I certainly am very happy in my career now, and yeah, that's how I got into this, and that's why. I saw generative AI coming. I saw the possibility, and exit stage left. Yeah.
That's great. That's super cool. So you had a little taste of SAP recruiting early on. You and entertainment do that for a while, and then when you start to question or think about where am I going next, you kind of look back on that experience and come full circles. That's super interesting. Is there, what's interesting is you were talking about your experience with casting and how it relates to recruiting. Yeah. When you're casting, I've never done casting. I've never worked in the entertainment industry, so I'm speaking out of term here. But it seems like when you're casting, you're looking for a lot of intangible stuff. Like there's a gut feel, instinct, intangible feel. So in other words, I imagine when you're looking for the right actor, it's not the person that memorizes the script best. It's the person that just has the aura or whatever you're looking for. Do you find that to be a strength that you can apply in your SAP recruiting now? Because I'm sure you can always find someone smarter, someone that knows S/4HANA better than any given candidate. But do you find that that's a helpful skill set for you to have to kind of find that intangible cultural fit and things like that people might be looking for?
Yeah, I think you really you really honed in on my secret here. So
I'm reviewing. We might have to edit this out. We'll cut it.
No. But I do think absolutely. I think having put in my 10,000 hours plus, really honing in on people and their that thing, that je ne sais quoi, that thing that makes them, that special elements is really, really helpful. And I think, like you said, you can always find somebody who is better in an SAP module, or who has more experience, or who has more depth, or maybe worked on the initial build team and like they're now coming over into this area. Like there's always somebody who's better at the tool. But at the end of the day, the soft skills are what win every single role. You need to see how somebody is going to integrate into a team, what they're going to add to the culture of a company or a project. You want somebody that you want to be excited to work with. You want to know that they're going to add value. So I think that the soft skills always, especially in interviews, beat out the hard skills. So,
yeah. So when you're looking at candidates, and not all of them have that intangible, some of the soft skills that you were talking about, but perhaps they have the hard skills and they're really impressive on paper, but they don't quite have that intangible thing that you're looking for. What do you do in those cases? Is it something you can coach them on? Can it be learned? Or do you say, hey, this isn't the right match and I'm going to move on to another candidate? Like, how do you view that?
So I think soft skills are something that for a lot of folks are innate. You're born with this ability to connect, or your upbringing has really kind of put you in that. Maybe you're one of many siblings, so you're used to, navigating table talk with 10 people and being able to kind of further that conversation. But I also think it's one of those things where you can etch away over time and you can slowly get better. But to say, I guess to really think about what a quick fix may be, being a producer, I've spent a lot of time helping folks present themselves for air. Folks that, I was like, okay, this is the right person to, go on this competition show, but, they're a quiet MMA fighter, and like, this is my background, and I, okay, we've got to coax this out. We've got to find this, So I do a lot of interview prep, and my team does a lot of interview prep, wanting to make sure that that person is comfortable going into their interview. But, at a certain point, we've got to just, really hope for the best, because, not there to be the producer in the moment or be the person helping and providing a helping hand, or, throwing an alley-oop. But But yeah, I do think it is something that can be improved. I do recognize that a lot of people are born with it or develop it over a lifetime. But I think it is one of those things that, you should be working hard at. And thankfully, it's one of those things that you can work on professionally, personally. You can work on it inside and outside of work. So
Okay, hold that thought, Jonathan. I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Journey to S4HANA podcast. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Eric Kimberly, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. And I wanted to take a moment and tell you a little bit about Third Stage and what we do and how we help clients through their S4HANA implementations. First of all, Third Stage is technology agnostic, meaning that we're not affiliated with SAP. However, we do have quite a bit of experience helping clients through their S4HANA implementations. We help clients evaluate and do a fit gap analysis of S4HANA. We help them find the right system integrator. We help them negotiate their contracts with SAP and their system integrator. And then we also help with implementation planning and the implementation itself. So we help mobilize the right resources, make sure you've got a solid and realistic program to manage overall S4HANA implementation. And then we'll help with the program management, the change management, as well as process improvement. We also provide some technical services around data migration, as well as architecture and system integration as well. So those are just some of the things we can do to help you through your transformation. And if you're looking for more information about it, or if you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to just bounce around ideas or be an informal sounding board for you as you begin your transformation. You can reach me by contacting me via the contact information in the links below in the description field for this podcast. So look forward to chatting with you, and we'll see you soon.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Welcome back to Journey to S4HANA, episode number 10. My name's Eric Kimberling, and we're here chatting with Jonathan Whipple, who's a recruiter in the S4HANA space, and we're talking about how to assemble a project dream team. Yeah, even I've worked with consultants that have gone to Toastmasters, for example, which, for those that don't know, it's a public speaking, not training, but it's a way for you to have a forum to go practice public speaking. And that's just one small example of a way that if you're not a good public speaker, or if you're just not comfortable in front of people, that could be a good way to learn that skill. So there are things like that you could do. I agree that that you could do, but I think it's interesting because it's so often in this industry, it's about what certifications do you have, which modules do you know, how many S4HANA implementations have you been on before, and if you kind of hit all those checkbox, great, you're in. But it's not always that simple, nor should it be. If I'm on the buying side, if I'm a person that wants to hire one of your resources, I should be thinking about more than just the checkboxes, right? I should be thinking about, is this a good fit for our team, especially if it's a long-term role or a permanent role, I would imagine. Do you do both short-term and permanent roles in your placement efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do permanent placement. We do contract-based work for projects, programs, transformation. Like we really run the gamut. Anything one of our partners needs.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. So when you're working with these different candidates and trying to place them with the right organizations, whether it's a consulting organization or whether it's an end client that's trying to hire SAP resources, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see them make that either you didn't coach them enough, or no matter how much you coach them, they still did it, or you catch it ahead of time before you present them to a client? What are some of those mistakes that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think one is really just assuming that your background's going to get you the role. I think, especially if you've come out of, say, a FANG environment, whether it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, you're one of those in the in the stream, or household name, or a product that's in somebody's pantry. So like you've got a household name on your resume, and you've got the chops. Just assuming that the background, the exposure to brand new tools, things that are of the moment, are going to win the role, because like I said, there's always somebody better. There's always
Right.
somebody who has that experience. There's always somebody who is just a second further down the line than you are with your experience. But those soft skills, those interpersonal skills, that ability to make an impact and really go in and grab a room and make the interview yours, and collaborate in an interview and go back and forth and start bouncing off ideas, start talking about solutions, start talking about the value you see, or, oh, that's an interesting problem. How are you tackling that? Here's how I would do it. I think really going in and making an impact, I guess, going in and not looking for the opportunity to make an impact in an interview is a mistake that I see often.
Yeah.
I a lot of times talk to candidates who are like, hey, I went into this role and, this was the best rate, or this was, what was available at the time. And it's not something I was really passionate about. So I'm looking for something that I'm going to get excited about. I start to see, I guess what I've seen is a pattern of, I've done this and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't gain a lot. I improved my bottom line, which was awesome, but I'm not walking away from this with better skills. I'm not walking away with exposure to something that I haven't done. I could have done this in my sleep, or, it wasn't great for me personally, or I feel bogged down. Do the things that you're passionate about, inside and outside of work. Do what you want to do. And
Right.
if it's not speaking to you, don't do it. And then another one I think that I see very, very often, and I try to mitigate a lot, and so does my team, is, it's interesting to see people who are very, very, very skilled technologically have trouble with hardware. And I mean hardware like going into a Zoom meeting or going into a
Right.
Teams meeting and not being framed, not having proper lighting, not having the sound there, just sitting in their car. Like, hey, I'm
Right.
sitting in my car and I'm driving, I'm doing an interview. Like,
Right.
you're an enterprise architect, man. We need to convey what you're going to do here, not like, well, I'm just doing this while I'm driving. So I
Right.
think it's really, the mistakes are not recognizing that there are other pieces to the package beyond your experience and beyond the value you're going to add once you're already in the seat. Like, don't look at it as a guarantee. Look
Yeah.
at it as something that you're going to win. You're going to add value. You're going to show them who you are. And I think it turns out great. But I think a lot of times people look at the finish line before they're there, and start counting that win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets back to the connection that you were talking about. Like, how do I make a connection with the person that I might be working with for the next year, 2 years, or perhaps even longer,
Yeah.
on a project. So that's a great point. So you mentioned earlier how you were one of the early adopters of generative AI, and it helped you frame the decision you made to move into the SAP world. How do you see AI affecting SAP careers going forward?
Well, actually, let me take a big drink before this one.
It's that big of an answer, huh?
It's that big of an answer. So I think I feel confident that there's no industry, there's no technology, there's no role that will be unaffected or untouched from AI. It's just a matter of how rapidly and what does that look like. I don't know what the future holds and what any sort of big change is going to look like. I think we all see a giant wave coming, and it's just a matter of, are we surfing that wave or are we running from that wave? I like to think that we're surfing that wave. I think that the near term, the immediate future is really going to be driven by AI empowered SAP professionals. Taking what you already have and augmenting your abilities, collaborating with a greater intelligence to, look at things at a bigger scale and more rapidly, whether that's analytically or, whether that's, okay, this is my solution. What is this? What am I missing? How can we improve on this? Or having, the ability to just rapidly iterate and rapidly ideate and really, I guess, give yourself a superpower. Like, that's what I see is the ability to really, really make much, much more impact, much faster.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about so let's say there's a project team that I'm
Yeah.
putting together. I'm putting together a project team for a big S4HANA implementation. It's a global project, and I need, say, historically, I would need, say, 100 people. That includes offshore ABAP developers and people that are configuring and doing integration and all that stuff. Do you think AI will turn that into a different number? Like instead of 100 people, now maybe I only need half that amount, or do you think it's still 100 people, but those 100 people can do a lot more now because they've got AI, they've got access to these tools? How do you see it shaking out in that regard?
Well, the recruiter in me still sees 100 roles. Still
Right.
sees 100 roles there. Okay, so
Right.
first and foremost, I don't want this to go away. So I think it's really reduction of timeline. I think it's really doing more faster, and I think that's the thing that we should all be focusing on, because the ability to deliver a solution faster is the goal regardless. So I think what I see is getting out and running and accomplishing milestones much, much faster.
Right. So if let's say I'm a ABAP developer, or a very technical hands-on resource, and
Yeah.
my job is going to potentially be more affected by AI than others. What should I be doing to prepare? I mean, how do I embrace AI? How do I upskill my skills in the world of AI?
So I think that's a really, first of all, that's a really good question. How does an ABAP developer really, prepare for this time? My guess is they are the people that are the early adopters, even before they started talking about, hey, I'm using this.
Right.
Being connected with a lot of folks in the SAP community who are focused on ABAP, I know that to be true.
Mm.
So I think it's really having as much exposure as rapidly as possible. Thankfully, there's a wealth of tools you can use right now. I know that GPT does a wonderful job and even has custom GPTs that are built in that area. So I'm guessing some of these ABAP folks are the ones who developed those and have released those on the market. But in terms of upskilling, I think it's very, very exposure focused. Being that they're developers, I think it's getting hands on and figuring out how to make the most of what's available.
So in addition to learning and embracing AI, there's other emerging technologies. Technology is always changing. In what ways do you recommend that SAP experts keep up to date, in terms of emerging technologies and just other changes in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's keeping your finger on the pulse and really understanding, how things are moving in real time. I think one of the best ways to do that, and this is a little bit of a self plug, go to my content, go to any post that I make, and just go to the first comment. Go ahead, skip the content, just go to the first comment, and I will leave a comment every single time that I list all of who I see as the best SAP content creators. I would start there. They're domain experts in, every module. I've tried to make sure that I've got somebody spread out. I guess it's impossible to cover every module, but the ones that I can fit in here. So if you're looking for a FICO expert, awesome. Chirag Thakur is absolutely incredible. You've got Venkat Vaisa, who's an incredible BTP expert. So these folks make the information accessible. They explain things in layman's term. They also get very, very deep and technical and very advanced and very, very granular with details.
Right.
Of course, they're providing of the moment information, but they're also pointing out, hey, this is the best YouTube series on this, or this is the best course to take from SAP, or here is something that Zarentech or Michael Management Corporation are offering. They're really great at knowing because they've been through it. They're going to give you their experience interviewing. Here are the questions that I'm being asked. Here's where I got stuck. Here's what I learned through my process. So for me, I think learning and upskilling, I can't necessarily put my rubber stamp on any one area or course or that, because I'm not in this world. But if I were doing these things, if I were actively, in the market and I worked in SAP as, a hands-on person, I would be looking and asking these friends that are making content. I would be looking at what they're doing and finding out from their recommendations, which they're making every day. So yeah. I think that's that's number one to me.
Okay, hold that thought, Jonathan. I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Journey to S4HANA podcast. We'll be right back. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to Journey to S4HANA, episode number 10. My name's Eric Kimberling, and we're here chatting with Jonathan Whipple, who's a recruiter in the S4HANA space, and we're talking about how to assemble a project dream team. Well, and you kill two birds with the same stone. You're not only educating yourself, learning from other people, but back to your earlier point about connecting. You're connecting with people, you're networking, you're probably opening up yourself to other opportunities that you may not have known about otherwise. So that's pretty sound advice. And by the way, just for people listening that don't yet follow Jonathan, I do highly recommend you follow him. This is actually going to lead into my next question too. But before I ask you this next question, it's worth noting that you were sharing with me before this interview how you weren't a big LinkedIn guy 2 years ago. You just literally just got on LinkedIn not that long ago, and I lost count. I lost track of where you're at, but you're over 10,000 followers already, which is an unbelievable trajectory that you're on. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you, do you have any secrets or tips on how you got such a following in such a short period of time, especially because you haven't been in the SAP world for 20 plus years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the shout out. I crossed 11,000 this morning, which I'm really proud of.
And by the time this podcast airs, I'm sure it'll be, the 11,000 number will be obsolete. But
it may be, but it's been exciting. It's been exciting to kind of like dive into a new thing and just kind of figure it out. I posted actually just today about, I created content for a year and nobody paid attention. Like no one at all had anything to say except one person. And this one person, it's a guy named Harwinder Singh, who's incredible EWM resource. Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody's looking in the market, Harwinder Singh, incredible EWM guy. Only person that liked my stuff, only person that commented, only person that reposted. And that kept me going every day. So I did everything every expert said I should do. I tried different tools. I tried, let me use AI. Let me take my old content, let me repurpose it and have AI put together different analogies. And one day I sat down and I was like, I just need to write directly from my heart. I need to try and tell a story. I need to do what I would do outside of SAP if I was just going to sit down and write. So I wrote, this is the only SAP post you need to read. I was like, let me just like really lean into it and like go with some gusto. And I pounded the keys, man. I was like, this is going to be the thing. Somebody's going to see this. And it worked. Like, oh, hey. So authenticity and being able to actually tell your story, just as I've talked about with interviews and in every other area of SAP, I think being yourself and connecting with your audience and sharing a piece of you is really, really what matters. So the consistency was really the toughest part. And then finally getting to the point of like, you know what, I'm going to quit or I'm going to make it on this post. I'm just going to lay it all out there. So I wish I had some tips. Actually, I think I do have a couple. Maybe I've got a couple here. I would say first and foremost, be a great commenter. Not only is it an opportunity to help boost up somebody else's content and start a conversation and get on the page of somebody who's an influencer, but it's an advertisement for you. Like you've got the ability to go in there, make an awesome point, and then, Eric, you're going to see it and go, okay, what's going on? Like who is Jonathan that just commented on my post? I want to go over there and see what he's got going on, which is how we're doing this today.
That's how I found you. Yeah. I think you commented on something and I was like, who's this guy? I've never heard of him. Yeah. Went to your page and I saw your posts, and your posts are extremely engaging. I mean, literally every post you put out, I feel like is very hard punch. It's kind of a in a good way, kind of a slap in the face, like kind of a wake up, like, oh yeah, I got to pay attention to this one. And then of course I like your list. I've found a lot of SAP resources that I didn't know about through your list that you put in the comments of every post. So I appreciate you doing that. So sorry to interrupt you, but that I wanted to make that point clear to the audience as well.
Well, thank you. I think that the comments is incredibly, incredibly important, and it's just like one of those arts that people aren't focused on. More often than not, somebody might say, "Hey, that's helpful," and to be honest, I do that often too. I do that very, very frequently. But at the same time, I want to go in and I want to make sure I'm adding value for you, Eric, for any friend that's making content. I want them to. I want to start a conversation. I want the comments to go because that's what I want for my content. So I think being a good creator starts with making good content. The other thing is and I think a lot of people don't necessarily see this. Ask one thing. Don't ask a bunch of questions. Don't have a ton of call to actions. You want to go in and ask that one thing to get them engaged, get them interested on your piece of content, and get them in the comments and talking or resharing or reposting, whatever it is. Once you ask too many things, then they're like, okay, what am I going to do? This is a little overwhelming. Just focus on that one thing that you want to come out of it. And ideally that one thing is leading to comments that will then lead to future content for you. So I think just focus on your audience. Don't look at impressions. As tempting as it is, I'm a video game guy, and I have been my whole life. So watching that high score go up, watching those likes go up, watching those reposts, watching those comments. But what matters is the conversation. What matters is what people are asking you, what they're saying to you, and that's what you should speak to. What the people are commenting about, what they're DMing you about. Focus on that, and the rest is easy.
Yeah. So I think a lot of what you're alluding to and sort of what you're dancing around here and getting to is this whole concept of personal brand and thought leadership. And I've seen you post on your LinkedIn page many times comments about basically encouraging your followers and encouraging consultants and experts in the industry to establish their own personal brand and establish themselves as thought leaders. And in fact, you have sort of a call to action that you want to help people establish themselves in that way. Why are you so passionate about that? And why is that so important in being an SAP expert?
Yeah, absolutely. So being on the talent side of things, what I see all day is the talent gap, very specifically. I mean, there's no shortage of articles in every publication that is aware of SAP that there is a need for additional talent. We're transforming rapidly. The 2027 sunset is coming up for ECC. So there aren't enough folks. And I had a theory, and I think that this theory is holding true, that part of the talent gap is influenced by a content gap. There's not enough people making content in this space. There's not enough people that know about SAP outside of SAP. Like, it's kind of strange to me. SAP is, responsible for 40 plus trillion dollars of commerce running through it. Yet it's somehow a $40 trillion niche. Like, if I walked out onto Hollywood Boulevard right now and I said, what's SAP? I asked 100 people. They might talk about TreeSap. Like, they're not
Right.
going to know about this. They're not going to start speaking to us about ERP. So what I want is more people talking about this. I want to drive more potential candidates, because I know as we get closer to 27, there are going to be less people in the market. So that's the selfish end of this. I want more people in this because I need to be able to place more people. They're not going to be there. That pool is going to keep shrinking as we get closer. So
Right.
that is one piece of it. But as an actual SAP expert, the purpose of building your brand is it's one thing to show on your resume what you've done. You, Eric, I'm sure anybody wants to reference check you. They're going to start with your YouTube page. They're going to go, okay, Eric's already talked about this. Like, this is how he would tackle this problem. I know
Right.
how he would do it. So you can bypass a lot of that and really focus on the thing that matters. And I know I'm, using the hammer on the same thing. You can focus on the relationship. You can focus on the connection. You can focus on the solution for that client specifically. Your brand can speak to who you are before you walk in the door. That's what you want. What you want is somebody to go, this is an expert on this thing. I know because I just read this post. Hey, I've already answered this question. That gives me more time to connect with this person and build that relationship. You want
Yeah.
that calling card to speak for you.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I can attest to the fact that a lot of clients, most clients we get at Third Stage Consulting, are because they saw a YouTube video. I mean, that's hands down the number one lead source for us. And what they commonly say is, "I feel like I already know you guys. I feel like I already understand what you do. I understand that you know what you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera." So to your point, it allows you to bypass that whole, who are you? Do you really know what you're talking about? Do you have experience? Do I like you? You can get a lot of that out of the way by not even just creating videos. I mean, if you're not, I used to be extremely uncomfortable doing videos when I first started my YouTube channel. I hated it. I did not like doing it. And it took me a long time to get going on it. And so before then, I would just write blogs because I'm like, I'd much rather just sit behind a keyboard and share my knowledge that way. And that's perfectly fine too. It's another way that you can connect with an audience. You can post it to LinkedIn newsletters. You can create your own blog, whatever. So I think that's you're really onto something there. That's a great way to not only demonstrate your knowledge, but to create that connection that you've been talking about as well.
Absolutely. And I'm not surprised to hear that that's the number one lead source for you. I'm sure on the consulting side that reduces the sell a lot. It's let's go in, let's talk about this. Let's build a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's going to be, it becomes less transactional too, I imagine, from your perspective. It's less of a transaction of, here's a body with certain skill sets that I'm giving you. It's more of a deeper connection than that, which I imagine helps you. It probably helps the people you work with as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Paint a full picture. Tell the whole story.
Yeah. Now, what if I'm new to the SAP ecosystem, or I'm trying to make a career change within the SAP world? What are some best ways to get started or to really jumpstart my career as I enter this SAP space?
Yeah. I think the first thing, the first step in that journey starts with what gets you excited in business outside of SAP. If you're a finance person, you've got a clear path. Maybe you're a production manager and you're on a floor and, okay, I'm used to using some of these supply chain modules. I'm used to using production planning as an end user. Okay, cool. Like, I guess I know on the other side what that transformation looks like, and seeing folks go from, the business side to the IT side. So I think it's really honing in and seeing what matters and what makes impact on you and what gets you excited. Because once you determine what that is, you can just kind of run in a direction. In terms of where to go and what to look at, I would look at, SAP recruiters. I'd look at SAP talent experts. you can start here. Again, I know I'm plugging myself, but I try to focus a lot on the SAP talent market and speak to what's going on and try to give of the moment information. And you'll see a lot of folks in the comments there that are talking about that. But I think that the people that run talent acquisition at different companies that run SAP are also a great spot to look. But if you're transitioning, it starts with your excitement, then, look at what the experts are talking about. What's interesting, get your hands on into a system, find ways. And there's plenty of options through SAP. There's plenty of options through other ed tech companies to kind of immerse yourself and really find out what's possible. That's I think where I'd start.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great sound advice. And just to sort of summarize all this stuff that we're talking about, how do you see, or how would you summarize the future of SAP careers in general, whether you're a consultant or a SAP practitioner of sorts, or looking to get into it? How would you predict the future of what's going to happen in this space, just in general?
That's a really good question. I think when I look at the future of SAP and what the future of SAP means for an SAP consultant, I think it's AI empowered, and I think it is accomplishing more in less time. Everything that I am seeing is preference for at least remote options. I'm not saying necessarily 100% remote. If you're a person that needs to be face to face with the business driving change, I know that there are some limitations. Although, did those limitations exist during COVID? I think that change was still driven, but nonetheless,
Right.
I think it is AI empowered, remote options, accomplishing more with less. I think that's what I'm seeing.
That's a great summary. AI doing more with less, and then having flexible work environments, maybe more of a hybrid, at the very least, a hybrid work environment.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. Well, I appreciate
in a $50 trillion niche. In a $50 trillion niche.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And in the next, you mentioned the 2027 deadline. I mean, there's a lot of projects are going to be taking place between now and 2027, and I'm sure well beyond 2027 as well. So I think seems like there's plenty of opportunity here, at least in the next few years within the SAP space.
I think there is an entire world of opportunity over here. So come on, let's go.
Absolutely. Well, good stuff. I appreciate having Jonathan on the show. Great conversation. We've got a few things to debrief and follow up on based on that conversation. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Journey to S4HANA. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Journey to S4HANA, episode number 10. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journeytosforhana.com. And this is the podcast that covers everything related to S4HANA implementations. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Tom Productions. So thank you for being here today. And Darian, we just had Jonathan on the show, super interesting guy, non-traditional guy in the SAP space. What are your thoughts and questions from that conversation?
Yeah, I think it was super interesting. I think he has a very unique perspective that a lot of people just don't get with the type of background that he has. A couple questions that I kind of got from listening to the conversation that you guys had. One of them being about how you guys emphasize the importance of soft skills, especially in SAP recruitment, and how they really highlight that. Can you share more about the importance of the soft skills that companies can look for and how people can achieve those soft skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer from both angles. If you're someone looking for a consultant or a team member that's going to do a good job in your S4HANA implementation, you do want to understand how well they understand S4HANA, what their technical competencies are and their functional competencies. That's all important, but what's even more important is just the ability to listen and understand, because there's a certain amount of arrogance that can come with a lot of knowledge. So if you're a superstar expert in S4HANA, but you have all the answers in your mind and you tend to not listen as much to a client's needs or to an organization's needs because you think you have all the answers, which is a common problem in consulting, by the way, not just SAP consulting, but just all kinds of consulting. That's something that's going to be a problem. I think that's a liability. If someone's super smart, super knowledgeable of SAP, but they can't listen or they don't care to listen, to me, I won't hire that person. I mean, and that's a philosophy we have at Third Stage when we hire people. Is we won't hire necessarily the smartest people in the room. We'll hire the people that are smart enough, but they have the higher EQ and the higher, the more advanced social skills. And so I think that ability to listen is probably the most important thing that you want to look for when you're recruiting someone or trying to fill a role. But then certainly if you're a consultant or you're trying to become a team member on a project, you need to listen and understand, what are we trying to do here? What are our goals and objectives? What's the overall business driver here? And then figure out, how can I deploy S4HANA to fit that? And by the way, it may look a lot different than the way you've deployed S4HANA in the past. Just because you've done it other ways in the past doesn't mean that's the right way for this current situation that you're in. So I think just being able to adapt, to listen, to adapt and adjust to what the needs are of an organization, I think those are some of the most important skills. And then, of course, being able to collaborate and work as a team and communicate well, those are all important skills too. Because again, if you've got the deep technical skills, but you can't listen or communicate or work well as a team member, it totally undermines the rest of your strengths.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, I know Jonathan mentioned the impact of generative AI on his career decision. From your perspective, how is AI influencing talent acquisition and recruitment strategies within the SAP ecosystem?
Well, writing job descriptions, starting there, that becomes a lot easier. In fact, I just wrote right before we started filming this episode, I just wrote a job description for a role, but I didn't write it. I used ChatGPT to write it. So, I hate writing job descriptions and I absolutely despise it. And so it's great to have ChatGPT to do that for me now. So, starting with the job descriptions, generative AI can help with that. Certainly, being able to scan or summarize someone's resume and someone's bio and background or LinkedIn profile, there's ways you can use AI to just sort of give you the highlights, which can be very helpful. During interviews, developing the right sets of questions, you can use generative AI to help you with that. You can even take the person's resume, plug it into ChatGPT, and say, "Give me a list of questions I should ask this candidate." So there's just things like that it's going to speed things up for you, and it's probably going to help you identify things you might not have thought of otherwise, and it sort of fills some of the gaps of human imperfections and blind spots when it comes to building a team and recruiting people for your team.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good way that you can utilize AI, but then ultimately you're still making the decision on whether that person is really a good fit. I think it just assists you more so on the front end of things and preparing for conversations and whatnot.
Yeah, and also like say I interview 10 candidates for a role, I take notes on each of those 10 candidates. I could take those 10 sets of notes, plug it into ChatGPT and say, summarize, the strengths and weaknesses of each of these candidates, or, prioritize these candidates based on these notes. So there's a lot of ways that you can use it as a starting point. Now, obviously you don't want ChatGPT to make the decision for you of who to hire or whatever, but it can certainly speed up the process, or at least give you another data point to have, almost like another advisor, in your process.
Yeah, it's like a free second opinion, I guess, if you're the only one in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a super good interview. I think there was a lot that you could learn from that kind of different perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was good to have Jonathan on. I'd love to have him back on. And he's actually going to be speaking at our Digital Stratosphere conference in October. So he's going to be, he's one of the first speakers that we've confirmed for that event. And you can learn more about that event by going to stratosphere2024.com. It's a tech agnostic event that we host each year. And this time it'll be in downtown Denver, Colorado, the first week of October. And Jonathan, along with a bunch of other speakers, will be there. So with a bunch of other speakers will be there. So be sure to check that agenda out if that's something that might be of interest to you. And we'll obviously cover a lot to do with S4HANA and SAP in that conference as well. So thank you for joining today. Thank you, Darian, for another great episode. Thank you to Jonathan Whipple for being our guest here today. And thank you for listening. And if you want to see any of the past episodes of the show that you may have missed, be sure to go to journey2s4hana.com. In the meantime, we'll look forward to seeing you next week on episode number 11 of the show. And just to give you a preview, next week in episode 11, we're going to have Adam Cheatham from the Third Stage Consulting team on, talking about how to plan for S4HANA implementation. So earlier in this episode, we were talking about the importance of planning. We're going to get into what sorts of things you should be focused on during the implementation planning phase. So be sure to stick around for that. That'll be episode number 11 next week. But in the meantime, have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Journey to S4HANA.